Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. Is VMware feeling vulnerable? Is F5 ready to slay the Cisco dragon? Data hoarding, the eighth deadly sin. That and more on Techstrong, gang. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong Gang. Welcome to our Wednesday edition. We've got a great gang lineup for you today. Let me introduce them to you and then we'll jump into the great topics we want to discuss. First of all, joining us from out in San Francisco, it's our financial results and just technology reporter extraordinaire, Cory Johnson. Cory, welcome. How are you?
The fog is back.
The fog is, we're in the middle of the summer fog, huh?
Cold.
Carl, that's when we have it.
Yeah.
Carl the fog, we call him.
Coldest winter you ever spent is the summer in
San Francisco. Exactly. That's what they say. Mm-hmm. All right. I'm glad you're here, and at least in your room, the fog is cleared. So we're looking forward to having you here, Cory.
See if it's cleared up here. It's unclear.
Well, time will tell. Joining Cory and myself today, we have our Colorado contingent in from Futurum, Camberley Bates, and also Futurum CTA and Techstrong CTO, Mitchell Ashley. Camberley, how are you?
Doing great. We don't have the fog. I wish you'd send it to us because we've got wildfires going on here.
Oh, man.
How are you?
You haven't read about that yet, but it is that time of year. I'm sorry. Mitchell, how about you? You're just back from a kind of mini trip.
Mini trip to Minneapolis. This is good to be back before we head out to Black Hat. Just coming up. So
you see what I did there? Mini trip, like Minnesota.
Mini, haha. That's very funny.
Yeah, very funny, yes. Anyway.
I'm surprised you didn't go with Minneapolis, as in Big Apple, Minneapolis.
That's true. Okay, we could have done that one.
I stole that
for next time.
I certainly did, but no one out there knows. But anyway, Mitchell, Camberley, thank you for joining us from Colorado. Joining me here local in our Boca Raton headquarters studio, our Chief Content Officer. He's ecstatic. The Yankees are back, at least last night. Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike.
Good to see you, and October is looking good.
That's what my sons both said last night, too. Bring on the World Series. But, one game against the Phillies doesn't really make it. Anyway, welcome. So, gang, we've got some meaty, good stuff to talk about today. The first topic we're going to touch on is an article that was recently up in Techstrong ITSM around a survey of kind of looking into what people are thinking, feeling, doing around the VMware license changes that Broadcom kind of has instigated since acquiring VMware. Depending who you talk to, the sky is falling and this will be the death knell of VMware. Others say it's going to cut a lot of the dead wood out and will leave a leaner, meaner, better VMware out there. I don't know, Mike.
Well, the survey says that only 12% of the people are actually thinking about switching platforms. And it's interesting because I'm getting inundated by rivals of VMware all talking about how, they've got an alternative structure. And there's a bit of a marketing war going on here, no doubt. Camberley, I'd love to get your thoughts here, but it seems like everybody's mad, but not mad enough to leave the platform. What's going on?
The devil right, is better than sometimes that you don't know. I think what you need, I look into the market, and we've said this early on with the changes in the licensing, you need to bifurcate it by division. So the way I've looked at it and said, okay, the SMB guys, we're going to see that move because that's an easy move. The enterprise people have got some significant things they're facing. And the biggest one is not the technology, it's the people and processes and procedures that they have in place. And to do that lift and change over to something else is almost untenable because talk about technical debt. You're going to take people off of the core of what's already going on, whether it's AI or something else, and have them lift into another platform that's not as robust and big as a VCF environment? Don't think so. So probably what we're expecting to see is a couple of different changes. One, the enterprises will look at and say, can I move some of these VMs onto just vSphere? And that will cut my costs there. And then have the other pieces on VCF. That may be one strategy. Number two is to start all new development on containers as much as possible. But then I've got problems with my database systems that may not perform as well. And we got persistent data problems over there. So that would be the other one, is to say I'm going to establish a new platform for all my development, which is important because that's really the Kubernetes space is where we're seeing a lot of the AI develop here. And with that, maybe, just maybe, I bring up a VM system on that particular container operation, and I start maybe migrating a few over there. So that's kind of more what we're thinking about. We also are seeing that there is some movement in the very, very large organizations and where they're negotiating. They may be able to negotiate something temporarily for a couple of years, but suffice it to say, by the end of that couple of years, they're going to go back to the regular licensing. I don't see the demise of VMware. You look at how the mainframe group is just absolutely completely thriving. Greg Lotko has done a phenomenal job over there with the CA work, and they are investing lots of engineering in that group. Huge profits coming out of there. So I just don't see VMware at all going away in this situation. So pass it back to you guys. I'm sure Mitch has got a couple of thoughts on that as well. I can see him not. I've got a bunch of other issues, but I think that's enough of me talking.
Well, you nailed it on the you don't move from VMware to something else haphazardly, right? That's like saying Windows today, Linux tomorrow. Let's just flip over and start using that instead. It's a huge process to move. And as you said, yes, it's technology, but it's the knowledge that you build up. It's the skills. It's the process. That's tough. So I think kind of the bifurcation maybe of what you outlined as the two strategies of optimize wherever you can, move things onto another platform, either vSphere or something else. Maybe you start looking at something different at the edge, an OpenShift or something else. You start diverging a little bit in terms of the platforms that you use, but you're not going to move out the core platform. And unless somebody else comes up and says, we'll whole scale move you onto our closely equivalent, maybe roughly equivalent, which is just not going to happen. It's a tough spot to be in. It just reminds me of Microsoft when Microsoft would change their pricing and their pricing model. And it's like, what are you going to do? Right? Unless you've got a lot of clout with them, that's a pretty tough spot to be in.
Cory, do you think that Broadcom calculated all of this out beforehand as they put this licensing model together? Did they actually understand in the level of detail of just how much wiggle room they may have had to kind of recoup some of their investment costs in acquiring VMware?
Yeah, and I wonder how much this also is about new customers and setting themselves up for a better offering or cleaner offering to new customers as they expand, bringing into the fold some people that weren't there. And I wonder how much that approach matters for them here as they reorganize post-merger.
So I have some thoughts on this. What is the price? We're sitting here talking like everyone was loving VMware before this. VMware was a hot mess, right? Has been a hot mess. And I think really the question of, is this licensing change painful enough to move you off of VMware, is closely linked to what are your plans regarding transformation in moving to maybe a cloud native stack, a cloud native environment, in moving, into something new or else in terms of truly a transformation. I don't think it pays to just throw the baby out with the bathwater to go from, let's say, one hypervisor to another hypervisor. But if you were contemplating transformation, this could be the piece that pushes you over the edge. But regardless of whether you do it now and you do it because of the licensing change or something else, clearly VMware is older technology compared to what we're seeing in some of the newer stacks and newer compute out there. And I think over time it was eroding and will continue to erode. I think the ace in the deck for Broadcom is, does Tanzu become viable or not? What percentage of VMware revenue is Tanzu related? Right, and it's minuscule now compared, obviously, but that's where their growth is. I otherwise, I think it's a diminishing asset.
I think the other option to think about, though, is one of the things that they've done, or at least technically well, is that you can increasingly manage multiple distributions of Kubernetes from the VMware environment. Yeah. So they're not so heavily betting on Tanzu. They can kind of reposition the company a little bit to say, we are the management layer for the hybrid cloud, and I think that's part of where they're trying to get to. And I'm sure they would like everything to shift over to Tanzu, but I think they have a little wiggle room on that side. Camberley, what do you think?
So on the Tanzu side, Tanzu, when it first came out, was quite not the system that it needed to be. They updated it last fall, so it significantly came up to speed to be able to compete with SUSE and Red Hat OpenShift. So and there is some viability for that offering, but today it's very, very little bit of it is being used. So the question is, is there enough trust for the enterprise to invest in there? Because if it doesn't pick up, Hawk 10 will kill it. And that will be killed, give it 18 months, 2 years to come up to snuff and make the speed, but he'll look at the profitability of that and say, do I want to continue throwing the engineering in? So that's one consideration. The second thing is, absolutely, we used to, in our lab here that we used to always put our OpenShift environment or our SUSE Rancher environment on a VM environment. It was easier to manage. OpenShift installed on bare metal was really super difficult 3 years ago. It is no longer difficult. They've done major items to it. I mean, it was so difficult that when we were trying to put it on bare metal, we kept calling, the tech team kept calling for support. And the support finally came back and said, we just put it on VMs. It's like, please. So now, that was really crazy. Now we're doing it, as, bare metal. So I don't have to do it. And when I look at my staffing going into the enterprises, they are setting up separate clusters. I've got a VM world and they focus on that. And I have a container environment or my OpenShift or whatever. And that's a separate environment. They're definitely going to look at that. If I'm a mid-enterprise company, I don't have the resources to manage that. So maybe I'll be looking at a different strategy there. So it depends upon the staffing.
Interesting.
I think part of what went into the Broadcom math too was that they were also betting that if I have multiple platforms, my total cost of IT actually goes up more than the licensing fees are because I got to hire all the additional labor to manage that secondary platform. So I think they calculated that into their thinking as well. But Mitch, is it getting any easier to manage multiple platforms these days, or is it essentially, are they still all separate stacks?
Well, I think most organizations are forced into that scenario anyway through acquisitions, M&A kind of activity. So you end up with a real mixed bag of things, maybe your core. I almost wonder if VMware becomes sort of the legacy environment, if you will. You're going to run what you're running on VMware today. Largely, that'll stay where it is. The things like Camberley was talking about of the containerizing that you mentioned too, Alan. Containerizing that, maybe you look at OpenShift. That is a long history of its own barrel of monkeys too. It's not simple either, but it has gotten better. So there are other environments, other hypervisor environments. So I think truly to me, the thing that makes sense is if you don't need it on VMware, what is the alternative that you want to build around? And yes, there's additional cost, but at some point, this is do I want to be beholden to a single vendor? And who knows when the next price increase is going to come, if there's going to be more. That's always the challenge.
Fair.
VMware is the new mainframe. Does that kind of work for you?
No. Absolutely. Because
I didn't say that, Mike. Ouch.
No, I think the mainframe, unlike VMware, it's proven its mettle day in and day out. It's still rocking. And CA traditionally had I'm a Long Island boy, and Hauppauge, which was kind of made for. Actually, it wasn't. It was originally Hauppauge. They carved out a town for CA and called it Islandia. And really, I'm not kidding. And the CA almost supported. CA was like 85% of the tax roll for Islandia. And they had a killer mainframe business. A lot of it was acquired, right? They acquired a bunch of companies, but they had a great mainframe, and they were a great mainframe partner to IBM. They were always winning IBM's mainframe partner of the year kind of awards. And the mainframe business, I think, is a lot more stable because it's less susceptible. I mean, look, VMware has been a redheaded stepchild almost since its inception, right? EMC didn't know what to do with it. Dell didn't know what to do with it. Over the 15, 20 years it's been a company. It's actually been an independent company for a small sliver of that time. There's a pattern here of just vagabonding, and I don't know why. I mean, they certainly had great technology.
As Cory, do you have any insights into why VMware was never able to kind of go it alone? And
it was always an attractive property. I mean, it was a good, sticky business at high margins, and lots of people want to have that kind of thing as a basis upon which to expand their operations or to build on top of what they've already got.
I think somebody should write the Harvard Business case study about why VMware never made it as a standalone company, despite having this huge sticky base and plenty of revenue.
I mean, I agree. A lot of people have made a lot of money on it. Don't get me wrong.
It's like Ben Affleck. It's just always attached to something, just not always the right thing.
Cory, they were quite profitable as a standalone company. Yeah. So when you're saying that they didn't make it alone, I'm not sure, Cory. I remember them being a strong and profitable company before.
No, absolutely. That was what the attraction along.
It was more of an EMC looking to, because EMC at the time had picked up RSA, right, which was an expansion into a new market. They had picked up the Documentum. Is that what they had? Document management system. So they had built that out, and then they picked up VMware. So it was more of for them, it was more of a strategy of expanding what they were doing.
Yeah, it was a growth story. It was a growth story. It was a company that was growing a lot faster than EMC at the time, as I recall.
Didn't they own a huge chunk of VMware to begin with? Wasn't it originally spun out of EMC and then brought back in the fold?
I think that's right.
You had something called VCE. And that was the separate company that was built to bring up these stacks, because you had a standard stack that was being installed everywhere. That was VMware, Cisco, and EMC. And if I can put all that together and I'm shipping those blocks, remember the V block kind of thing?
Yep.
That was set up as a separate company. That did very well, especially since they told the salespeople you had to sell a V block in order to go to club. So that moved. So now you're looking and saying, okay, so this is much like when we had the 90s. You had a standard. You had Sun, you had Veritas, you had
the good old days.
Yeah, the standard platform here that everybody was buying, and that's the same thing that was happening here. So it made sense at the time. Today, it may not make that much sense, but at the time when the EMC picked them up, they were selling this VCE concept.
And part of it was the initial spin out, as I recall, was that VMware was growing so much faster than EMC that EMC didn't think they were getting the full valuation that they would get if people could just see VMware as its own company. So they let it spin out as its own company so people could see that growth.
But they still a chunk of it.
Correct. But once that growth slowed down, that wasn't such an attractive notion.
So we have seen historically that VMware is kind of like Jonah. They get swallowed by the whale and spit out again. Mm-hmm. Are they going to get spit out one more time, or is this the final resting spot?
That's a good question.
I think
Broadcom, where all the good things go to die, is that what you're saying?
No. Well, not to Broadcom, though. Camberley, what was your thought?
I think they're going to be highly profitable and return on investment to Mr. Tan.
And that's what Tan likes.
Yep.
And that's what he likes. So if you look at his other companies that he's had, they're going to find out what really works. What are people investing? VMware is a huge long tail. So if you look at, any kind of life cycle of a product, he loves that mature life cycle because I'm just going to grab the margin that comes off of it and keep investing in there so people stick.
Yeah, and kill what doesn't. And that may wind up being the fate of Tanzu. We're going to take a break. I think it's time for a quick break here on Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back and, as I mentioned at the top, is F5 really ready to go toe-to-toe with Cisco? Now we're kidding ourselves. We'll be back in a moment.
All right, folks, we're back and we're talking about F5, which posted some results this week that some folks on Wall Street got excited about. The stock was up for probably the biggest jump I've seen in a while. And it kind of brought back this whole conversation about, well, is F5 and all those networking companies out there able to fight the fight against Cisco? We've been talking about this debate now for 10 years. And Cory, I know you're following this. Are things changing? Is Cisco more vulnerable all of a sudden, or are these guys getting better?
These guys have changed, to be sure. We did a drill down earnings report on F5's numbers, and the market liked the stock like crazy. It was up 15% in after-hours trading, basically doubling the annual return of the stock in a day. But even though it was a negative quarter, revenues were down 1% on a year-over-year basis, but it was the smallest decline we've seen lately, and there was a suggestion that the worm has turned there. But a couple of interesting things. So, their operating costs seem to have, they've really restructured enough that they've got their operating costs down, and their margins have been really strong throughout this downturn. But the company has really changed away from selling stuff. Their systems business was less than 20% of sales. And they really are focused on, software, which drives the majority of the revenues, which is on services. So I think when we think about it as a Cisco hardware vendor, that's not the F5 of today. It is a recurring revenue. 77% of revenues are recurring, focused on software and software as a service, as opposed to licensed software. Their software as a service business is also growing really fast. And it's a, their system sales were down 30%. Their software sales were up 20%. And the result was a basically flat quarter. And they told us on the conference call that this is only going to continue as the systems sales start to recover here as well.
Camberley, to your point earlier, you were talking about, my heyday in the data center business during the dot-coms, right? And you talk about F5, big IP, and those big load balancers that they really kind of made their name with, made their bones on it. And you're right, it's not those big honking boxes anymore that sit in your data center. NGINX has been an amazing acquisition for them and has kind of, I think, led the way into their software renaissance. Security has also been, they were always a security play, but it was hardware. Now, it's clearly software and services. They're a different company. But to be fair, so is Cisco.
True that.
Right? Yeah, I mean, Cisco's percentage of business in hardware is not what it was either. And so, if you can't beat them, join them. And I think that's what F5's doing here.
Cory, it seems like Cisco with the Splunk deal is rolling up a lot of companies in their own right. And if you go listen to them, they've become a consolidation play, and they're saying you can get everything from App Dynamics and Thousand Eyes and all this stuff in one kind of massive subscription. Are we seeing a wave of consolidation that Cisco is helping to drive, or what do you think their outlook looks like?
With apologies to our friend, our aforementioned Hawk no company in the history of technology has been as successful as Cisco at rolling up other companies. Roll-ups, from a stock market perspective, heck, from a short-selling perspective, roll-ups are disasters, and for all kinds of important reasons, not least of which, quite often the different divisions have every reason to overstate what they're bringing to the table, and keep the plates spinning as they earn out their acquisition, then head for the exits, leaving things to crash as soon as they get paid out. And we see that whenever there's a roll up. I mean, with some rare exceptions, we see this happen over and over and over again, except for Cisco. They are so successful at M&A and bringing things in so that whatever their customers ask for, they'll do a big acquisition and bring those companies in. But their expertise ultimately is in M&A and sales, not innovation.
And really, to that point, and comparing to the Broadcom VMware thing, right? So every time Cisco does buy something, you know what happens? They do raise the price of that thing. I mean, it's just how they pay for the acquisitions. And yet, with Broadcom does it, we scream. And when Cisco does it, everybody kind of says it's just business as usual. So what's going on here?
I'm not sure if I can really super comment on the pricing because I don't watch that closely. But I think what we're talking about, Cisco, and you're using the terminology roll-up, which I would think that's meaning is I'm adding more pieces to a core technology that I'm bringing to the market and saying I want to leverage my standard sales effort going into that client to buy one more of the items that I have. That's not what Hock-Tan does. Hock-Tan buys companies that are they're older companies. They have got a long tail. They're very established within the companies that have bought them. And he's looking at saying, how do I bring profitability to that company? And that is a different way of looking at the acquisition than what Cisco is. So I wouldn't compare these two.
I like Chuck Robbins, the CEO of Cisco, quite a bit. He's a fun guy to be around. But I was listening to an entrepreneur. I in my office space here, a lot of startups around here in the Ferry Building, and I was listening to a semiconductor startup with some guys who had worked at Cisco, and they were describing the golf shirt guys who would come in and tell them about their sales efforts. And the golf shirt guys being a derisive term for probably anyone over the age of 35. And I think Cisco's loaded with the golf shirt guys who can take whatever they're selling and raise the price and sell more of it. But it's a different kind of company, and I also think that F5. You used the phrase redheaded stepchild earlier, Alan. I think that F5 being based in Seattle, not in the heart of Silicon Valley, and maybe not in the heart of anyone's sort of thoughts about the S&P 500, but it's a company that gets overlooked. I think that as they've made really big changes, no one's really noticed, in part because of where they are, and they don't get that attention that they might get otherwise.
All right, but we did see Juniper Networks now is part of HPE, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Will F5 make it as a standalone, or will they get rolled up?
They're making it just fine so far.
Yeah, I don't think Juniper ever made the switch to software as well as F5 did. But let's be clear about Cisco for a second. Camberley, you said about a roll-up. What Cisco has is an incredible, probably one of the top two in the world channel pipelines. Mm-hmm. Them and Microsoft.
Chuck Robbins used to run the channel.
Absolutely. And you have Cisco resellers who would cut each other's throat for 0.1% more, on a deal versus another reseller.
Especially if they're up against the carrier.
Yes. And so what they have is they have this great pipeline. They could literally take chopped liver and stuff it down that pipeline. It's just that good a pipeline. And so that, to me, is kind of the heart of Cisco's success. Through it all, they never lost that channel pipeline. F5, I mean, Cisco's channel is the envy of the industry, other than maybe Microsoft. F5 doesn't have that.
For many years, F5 could not spell channel, never mind.
No.
They have one.
No, well, because they sold big honking boxes.
They sold direct most of the time.
Yeah.
I think F5 still tries to differentiate on its technology more so than a Cisco does. I mean, when you talk about F5, you know about NGINX and, of course, big IP and web application firewalls and all the things that they do. Cisco, you think of just Cisco and the products that they've offered, they've acquired, or whatever. So I think it seems to me, like you said, Alan, the shift to software is the big change that F5 really has made successfully, less reliant on hardware, and doesn't have the massive portfolio of things that a Cisco, has to sell to everybody and everywhere. Now you can argue that's of course a source of a lot of revenue, true, but it kind of defocuses you on what you do and what you do well. And F5 is really focused heavily on security, and in that vein.
And so, Mitch, if I could ask a question, maybe to Mitch, is in my looking at the networking world, there is an adjacency for the security piece of it. I mean, I'm a data person. There is kind of an adjacency for security, but not of the level of, black hat kind of security kind of things that are going on. And what I was observing from a not really knowing Cisco that well is that they're bringing in those adjacencies like the Splunk, which services a lot of security kind of issues, and bringing that together because there, as you were saying, Alan, there is a sales motion kind of capability there that I can go in and talk to somebody that's similar to there that would be making that acquisition. Is that accurate?
But Camberley, interestingly, if you speak to the Cisco people, they don't view Splunk as a security play. They view it more with app dynamics and almost observability and monitoring and so forth.
Depends on the day of the week.
Well, yeah, it does.
Yeah. I was going to say they bought them as a security play. I haven't heard them change that, but I think to your question, Camberley, yes, it's hand in hand, networking and security, but it also extends up the stack now, right? It's now about platforms. It's about application delivery, application security, API security. So it's kind of grown up the software stack and is no longer just in the realm of, network security, if you will. So it gets them into whole other areas of, what's happening with IT and operations and infrastructure.
But data security has become its own thing as well.
Yeah.
Right. There's clearly a data security. We used to have DLP was kind of data security, but really wasn't. But now we truly do have data security plays going on out there. Anyway,
I'm not convinced that F5 is standalone forever. There's a little company down in Texas called Dell that's been playing around in this network
forever. Well, they resold F5. They were the only ones.
So, keep an eye.
You heard it here first. Now, we are not touting stocks. We don't give any investment advice. And I put no faith into what Mike Vizard says about that stuff. I
have no money in the stock market.
Just a little disclaimer. Anyway, let's take a break on Techstrong, gang, and let's come back and talk about hoarding. I love that reality show, The Hoarders, but we're talking about data hoarding now. Gluttony, data hoarding, all the rest. We'll be back. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we're back and we're talking about data hoarding, which has quietly been going on for some time now. But in the age of AI, suddenly everybody was pulling in all the data they can get and figuring out that maybe it'll be useful someday in the future. But Camberley, let's get started. How, in your impression, is the data management maturity of these organizations? Because frankly, I look at it and I just shake my head and go, man, there's just data everywhere. A lot of it's duplicate and a lot of it is just fundamentally bad.
Well, we've been talking about this kind of concept for a very long time. In terms of data management sort of thing. And something like ILM, which was coined by, I think, Storage Tech way back when, never took off. The question is, will data management now take off in terms of the amount of data that we have? Companies have hoarded data forever. They don't delete data for a bunch of reasons. One, the end users don't want you to delete. I mean, do you want to delete your data off your computer? Do you go and clean your PC of data? No. And that's because you have a personal tie that you may want to pull that out. Well, the same thing plays out with all the business units. They don't want you taking my data. And not only that, they don't want you to take it and move it anywhere either. So even doing that tiering kind of things, they tend to resist. Possibly will let you do that when you present them with, what the cost is for managing it. The other thing I'll talk about on the data hoarding piece of it, we've seen a resurge of tape. Not a lot of people understand that Glacier and Blob are sitting on tape. That's how they're managing that. There's been some big designs of tape library systems that are specifically for the public cloud to manage that. We've seen IBM come in with a brand new library that's focused directly to those cloud providers. And so they're all anticipating that this is going to continue to, grow and thrive, if you will, in terms of data hoarding. So, yeah, there'll be some data management, but it will be driven more by, and I'll stop after this, it's going to be driven by, number one, data security. I need to know where my children are. And, when the CIO or CEO looks down and say what data is exposed, so that's one place it's going to have. And the second place is AI. I need to be able to have the metadata and the data management in order to do the AI training that I'm going to have. And that's going to be drilled by the governance of those AI models and being able to tell people about where those answers came from.
I will speak on behalf of end users and then ask Mitch his opinion because he probably will shake his head. But it's just too damn hard to delete data. So that's why we don't do it. You don't make it easy enough. And I got a feeling that a lot of the platforms out there don't want me to delete data anyway because they're going to bill me for it somehow or other. And it's a part of some grand conspiracy. But what's your thought? Why can't we just more easily delete data? Because otherwise people would do it if I think it didn't take them twice as long to delete it as it does to create new data.
Well, data is akin to the furniture and boxes and all kinds of things I have in storage in my basement that are my kids, right, that have moved out and are all on it. But they might want that someday. That kitchen table could be helpful if they get a new house.
I'm saving that for the grandkids.
Right.
That I don't have.
And if they can't use it, the grandkids can use it. It's one of those. It's one of those that we think we might need it at some point, or there's no. The other side of it is no consequence to keeping it, other than maybe some cost. But if it's, of course, on your PC, you just get a bigger drive or, more efficient one. I think what's changed about data is we used to think of it as it's in a central place. It's in a location, in a data center, in a database, in a set of, managed places. But in today's, not to make it sound like it was always really clean and pristine, it wasn't. But in today's world, what's changed is everything emits data, and we want to keep all of that information, whether it's data coming out of our DevOps pipeline, data at the edge from Kubernetes running out there and what the applications are doing there. Every place in the cloud is generating, and in our data centers is generating data. And the question is, are we keeping it just to keep it, or can we use it in some helpful way? It's been sucked into the observability platforms to be useful in that capacity. Mm-hmm. But I think that's now we're asking the question of, well, how do we take more? Will AI let me take better advantage of this data? And I think to your point, Camberley, are we suddenly going to be disciplined about managing our data? As soon as I move some of that furniture out of my basement, we probably will.
So you were paying the bills for some of this furniture here, and video is an issue that we talk about here, and it's costly to store. There's more data types than ever, and we seem to want to store it all. At what point does the bank break?
It broke. Good question. We're deleting this as soon as we're done with it, pretty much. But so, Mitchell, you're dead on, right? Data hoarding is no different than any other kind of hoarding. And, we downsized. My kids aren't moving back to the house. I finally came to that realization. And I instilled a rule. If we haven't opened the box in 2 years or used something in 2 years, it's out. Done. Throw it away, get rid of it, give it away, donate it. That being said, I do have an extra storage unit because I have my oldest son's cradle that my wife is saving for when he gets married and his baby can have it.
And he won't want it anyway.
Yeah, I just open those boxes every 2 to 3 years because it's like Christmas all over.
Well, yeah, you forget what's in there. As you get older, it gets better. You can do it like every month and it's brand new, 50 first dates. But the cost of data, and I recognize, right, there's more expensive and cheaper places to store your data, and depending on, how often you're going to access that data, that has a big, outcome in where you're going to store it. But I think there's another aspect here that we haven't hit on, and that is, if I'm storing my data, like you're talking about the videos here, right? If I'm storing my data where they're publicly available, and just a quick plug, every Techstrong video we've ever done is available on techstrong.tv. And there's probably, I don't know, Mitchell, is there 7,000, 8,000 videos?
It's over 8,000 now. Yeah, we were 8,000, 8,500.
There's 8,000 videos there. You know who loves that data? That AI loves that data, right? And
you don't. It's the data you don't remember. You don't know if it's valuable now. The cost of getting rid of it might be greater later than the cost of keeping it. And that's AI is living proof of that. Keeping stuff laying around, you never know if you might have a video that or an audio recording of some crazy real estate developer is going to run for president who says he's grabbed some by the where, and suddenly that piece of data has great value and context that it didn't have before because the world has changed.
And AI is using it, and they're making money from it, and it was your data.
So Cory, will at the end of this whole AI boom, will it be the data storage companies that make all the money?
Well, the cost of data is similar to the performance and cost of Moore's law, right? Where it gets cheaper and cheaper to keep stuff. But the ability to sort through it is of course the amazing things that generative AI does is because the language models were in fact so large, but their functionality was limited by the recency of some of the data, and that they didn't have some of the initial Chat GPT and so on didn't have more recent data because they couldn't figure out how to put that into those large language models initially. And so the value of the data may be the most recent data, but the facility to go through that data bears out with larger and larger language models. I also think I know we're going to see some small language models emerge that have used the learnings of the vectorization of the large language models on smaller data sets that are more tailored for individual uses. If you're repairing a Ford engine, you might want to see all of the engine repair manuals in the history of automobiles, but you don't really need to have Shakespeare as part of that model in order to figure out the answer on how to fix your truck.
You may just want to have all the Ford engine info, and not Chevy or GM or
and then you can have that AI compute on the edge because the model is so much smaller. And I think that's something we're going to see emerge in the very near future.
I know. I ask my truck to be or not to be quite often. So little Shakespeare never.
The real question is, does it answer you?
Yes.
All right. So question from Camberley: do we need to send people to some sort of therapy session to get them to kind of not hoard, or is hoarding actually a good thing? I mean, where do we kind of sit on this extreme as we kind of listen to this conversation?
Well, as I said, the hoarding is really going back to the business unit people, the people that own the data. The IT guys don't care as much. They would just as soon go it out. So if you're in therapy, you're going to have to go to the marketing people, the finance people, the legal people, etc. And they tend to say no. So we had a project that we did, or initially started on, 5 years ago. This is pre-AI stuff. And the IT people came to us and saying that they needed to do something with the stuff that was on tape. They wanted to cycle it out and all that kind of stuff. This was a big insurance company and life insurance kind of thing that was old line, 100 years old, whatever. So we started embarking on this with them about how to do this and what the strategy would be. And then it came back. Lawyers said, don't touch this stuff. Project was off.
Huh?
So if you're going to do therapy, you're going to be doing therapy with the BUs, and I don't think they're going to sign up for it.
Cory, you said something?
No, why did the lawyers not want it touched? Because if you migrated it, you'd have to be responsible for it?
Their life insurance business. Think about the data that they need to keep and manage for actuarial tables as well as for legal purposes.
Oh, it's the secret sauce. It's everything.
Sure.
So
That's
they're
what-
basically saying we're not going to do that. Now, if you're other companies where you're saying you got that 7-year life that you want to get rid of some of that financial stuff.
Right.
But this was a different situation, different company, different situation.
I'm reminded of two stories, if I can really quickly. At Credit Suisse, when they were a leading banker in Silicon Valley, and there was a big legal case about this, when the head of the business unit, Frank Quattrone, was notified that they were being investigated by the SEC or something of that sort. An email went out reminding everyone about the data policy, saying, get rid of everything. That's our policy. Don't forget it. Mm-hmm. And that email was the subject of the trial, saying, did you tell everyone to destroy evidence? And the argument back was, not necessarily Frank, was no, that's just our policy. We wanted to remind everybody about it. The timing, however, was right after he was notified of this investigation.
Sounds like
the other one's more personal, but I might as well. My ex-wife watched an Oprah episode that said, if you haven't used it in a year or 2 years, throw it away. A few months later, I'm going through the files looking for their tax forms and financial records, and they're all gone. She'd thrown them all away.
That's not why she's your ex-wife, though.
No.
Well, years later, during our divorce, her lawyers came to me and said, how can you prove you brought assets to the marriage? And I said, well, she threw them all away because of Oprah. The judge didn't hear.
That's a new one.
So all the assets I brought to the divorce were considered joint property as a result of her throwing away all the records.
So it goes back
to management policy.
Is that called
goes back to the legal guys. There you go.
Absolutely. You know,
Hey, Alan.
we said we don't get personal. What's up, Mitchell?
Hey, Alan, one of the things I forgot to tell you while you were on vacation, we started a new show called Data Hoarders. Camberley's going to be hosting it.
I was just thinking the same thing. What a great reality TV show this could be.
Just
Right?
kidding.
Data hoarders.
There you
Look,
go.
I found Cory's old tax forms.
Yes, I've
Yeah,
got them
they
right
are.
here. I found them on
You
the
know
street.
what?
there
I'm
in San
thinking finding
Francisco
guests
for
for the show is going to be hard.
Oh, I don't think so. Anyway, hey, we're gonna end data hoarding right here. You know what? Though today is Wednesday, and we have one of our special correspondent videos. It's our friend Ira Winkler of Cyber Fame in his standalone Bite Me segments. And in Ira's segment today, it's why the CrowdStrike debacle reminds me of Y2K. You know, Ira's never short of an opinion, like right, wrong, or indifferent. He always has his opinion. Here's Ira Winkler on CrowdStrike debacle reminding him of Y2K.
Hi, this is Ira Winkler for this edition of Bite Me. Now, I'm recording this about a week after the CrowdStrike debacle happened. And a lot of people would expect me to trash CrowdStrike. No, I'm not going to trash CrowdStrike. It's not great. It's pretty bad. But I hate to say worse things have happened. And it's actually, I'm not really sure if they have happened, but let me talk about what my bigger concern is coming out of this, because fundamentally, I don't expect perfection on the part of any software developer. Let me say that. Is this bad? It's not great. I'll put it that way. However, let me go back and say what's probably more critical. What's more critical are people who are now going to second guess themselves for performing automatic updates. Fundamentally, yes, automatic updates can go wrong, and they have gone wrong, not just with the CrowdStrike issue, but with other organizations in the past, whether it be Microsoft, whether it be other vendors, where they didn't test it with all the software it's supposed to work with, or whatever the case is. Yes, automatic updates can create problems, but you know what creates more problems than automatic updates? Not doing automatic updates. Fundamentally, the biggest problem is that criminals are regularly exploiting unpatched software. And if all of a sudden people become afraid to patch their software because they think an automatic update is going to create a problem, we are going to suffer death by 1,000 cuts. What happens in this case is, yes, this was bad, and in some companies it was worse than others. And I understand that. I flew Delta. I love Delta, but they were really impacted by this. I don't know what went wrong there. That's going to be the subject of their own congressional hearings and everything else. That's a story. We got to wait to find out more information about that. But fundamentally, people cannot be afraid to do automatic updates because of this one issue. This one issue, again, was bad. But if we don't have automatic updates, there are going to be tens of thousands, if not millions of systems hit on a regular basis. Automatic updates are fundamentally one of the most critical things an organization could do to support them. Now, clearly, if you're in a large organization, you probably have the resources to test updates before you push them out. And God bless you if you do. And fundamentally, if you have unlimited resources or you have a large number of resources, yes, it behooves you to do this. But unfortunately, the people who have those resources to test automatic updates proactively before they roll them out to people are not the majority of organizations. Fundamentally, roughly, I'd say probably Fortune 200 and above may have this. So we're talking about what? 1%, if not less, of the overall user population. We really got to make sure that we don't lose sight of what's really important. Yes, the software should have been better tested by the vendor before it was released, and that was acknowledged. But fundamentally, that's the smaller problem compared to what the automatic updates traditionally have solved. Because I remember Y2K. Everybody complained about Y2K, saying, look at all those resources we put in and nothing happened. The reason nothing happened, you morons, is because you put in all that work up front. Without people going ahead and looking at all software at the time and making sure it was fixed, lots and lots of stuff wouldn't happen. And the fact nothing of significance happened was because of all the work done. Likewise, the reason that we're not seeing a lot of incidents is because of automatic updates, and we can't lose sight of that. So anyway, keep your automatic updates going. This is Ira Winkler for Bite Me.
Gotta love Ira Winkler. He had some interesting comments on the Olympics opening ceremonies as well. They have good stuff. Anyway, that's going to wrap up for Techstrong Gang today. Cory, Camberley, Mitch, thanks for joining us. Mike, is always great to have you here. We'll be back tomorrow with another great Techstrong Gang with some fresh gang members. We also have a full day of Techstrong TV immediately following this, so stay tuned for that. There's some excellent content there. And as we mentioned, you can catch all of these on Techstrong.tv or on our YouTube Techstrong TV channel. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Be well, be safe.